Go on. This is destiny.
The memory of blood still haunts me, a deep crimson spreading across the stone floor like an indelible curse. I can still smell the suffocating metallic scent, feel the cold of the ceremonial blade as it fell from my hand, its dry clatter echoing like thunder in my heart. Whose voice was it? A god, a ghost, or a mortal, hiding behind this demonic charade? I don't know. It all feels like a delirium, but its consequence is chillingly real. My brother fell into my arms, his blood staining my robe, while I trembled and stammered. No, it wasn't me, it couldn't have been me. I once loved my brother more than myself. As a child, I was timid, often hiding behind him whenever our father was angry. He always opened his arms to shield me. I remember one time, when I was only 6, there was a procession in the palace. Out of curiosity, I wandered into a dark hallway in the ancestral tomb. When the darkness enveloped me, I started to cry, my sobs echoing in the stone walls as if 100 children were crying with me. I thought I would be trapped there forever. But then, a warm hand took mine. It was him. He led me out, and the sunlight washed away the darkness. He smiled and told me, "Don't be afraid, my brother. As long as I'm alive, no one can harm you." From that day on, I believed he was the torch illuminating my life. As we grew up, I always followed him. In our hieroglyphic lessons, he would read aloud, while I slowly copied. He patiently corrected every stroke. During archery practice, I was often clumsy, my arrows flying astray. He would laugh, place his hand on my shoulder, adjust my stance, and teach me to breathe deeply. When my first arrow hit the bullseye, he patted my shoulder proudly, as if the victory was also his. Back then, I thought, if I ever had to choose between the throne and my brother, I would choose him without hesitation. And yet, here I am, a traitor to everything. I plunged a dagger into the back of the man I once swore to stand by until death. But was it really me? Or was I just a puppet of another force, one I've never seen, but that has seeped into my dreams, into my very flesh? If I truly betrayed him, then why do I still cry? Why do I still tremble every time I remember the look in his eyes? If it wasn't me then who took my hand, who took my soul, and turned me into a tool to end the Pharaoh's life? Sitting here in the darkness, I can still hear that whisper, the voice that guided me in that fated moment. You are only doing what was destined. You have no other choice. ... Double quotes. No. I had a choice. I once had love, and an unwavering vow. So why? ... Why did it come to this? I don't know the answer. But I swear, by the very blood this hand has spilt, I will find the truth. Even if I have to dig to the bottom of the darkness, even if I have to face the most evil forces, I must know who is the true murderer of my brother. In my youth, the royal palace was a maze both magnificent and terrifying. The towering stone walls, the pillars carved with majestic deities, the murals recounting our ancestors' victories, all made me feel like a tiny grain of sand in an endless desert. Without him I would have been lost. My brother was always the guiding light. The first time our father took us to the temple of Ra, I was trembling. The rows of white-robed priests, the chanting echoing in the great hall, the dense incense smoke seemed to want to swallow me whole. I bowed my head, clinging to my brother's back. He turned, took my hand, and whispered, "Hold your head high, you are the flesh and blood of the gods. There is nothing to fear." I did as he said, and strangely, as his hand tightened around mine, I felt as though the gods themselves stood behind me. From that day on, I always told myself, if he is the sun, I will be the small star that follows his light. I thought that vow would follow me for a lifetime. But fate cruelly shattered it in the most brutal way. When I look at the present, when I see my hands still trembling from having just stabbed my own brother, I cannot believe it. How could a person who was once saved by him, who once swore an oath to him, become his killer? Sometimes I think, Perhaps I truly betrayed him. That deep within my heart, there was a seed of envy, a desire for the throne that I dared not admit. Perhaps the voice in my head was just the echo of my own hidden ambition. But at other times I believe there was surely another hand at work, because the feeling when the knife went down, it wasn't like holding a weapon on the battlefield. It was like I was being led, like a sleepwalker who had lost all control. So who led my hand? A supernatural force, or a mortal, hidden behind the rituals and ghostly whispers? That question torments me, like another blade piercing my chest. When we grew up, our father passed away. My brother ascended the throne, becoming the pharaoh of both banks of the Nile. I was not envious. On the contrary, I was proud, because I knew that the throne was not just his, but a shared responsibility for both of us. In the first years of his reign, he always called me to counsel. Whenever he sat on the throne, he never forgot to have a chair for me beside him. The high officials gradually grew accustomed to the sight. The pharaoh and his younger brother always together, like two suns shining brightly. The people hailed us, calling us the divine twins. I remember, during a harvest festival, as we stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the square, the sea of people cheered his name, then my name. At that moment, he turned and smiled. See, they love you as they love me. My heart almost burst with pride. But now, that memory only brings me more pain. Because the one I loved, the one I trusted most, is the very person I stabbed in his own blood. Every time I close my eyes, I see the moonlit Nile night, hear his laugh, hear our oath, and then, those images are covered by a spreading pool of red blood. Was the oath under the moonlight just an illusion? Or was my will erased, turning me into a living dagger for a dark conspiracy? Our first victory is still etched in my memory as clearly as the morning sun. When foreign invaders from the east poured in, I was just of age. It was my first time in battle, and my heart was filled with fear. The war drums boomed, the dust swirled, and the endless rows of spears looked like a forest of death. I trembled so much my hand couldn't steady my sword. He saw it. He rode his horse towards me, stopping in front of me, his voice resolute. "You are not a child anymore. Look at me. I am here." His eyes were bright, as strong as the god Horus himself, and in that moment, my fear vanished. I charged after him, my sword raised, the soldiers' cheers sounding like thunder. We drove back the enemy and won the victory. On our return, the people lined the banks of the Nile, cheering us on. They threw lotus flowers into the water, letting the white petals float downstream to bid farewell to the triumphant army. He stood on the chariot, raising his sword, and I was right beside him. I saw the admiration in the people's eyes, heard them cheering both our names. That night, at the victory celebration, as wine filled the golden goblets and music and dance filled the palace, we clinked our cups. He leaned in and whispered, "See, this is our victory. No one can ever divide this brotherhood." I believed it as surely as I believed the sun would rise each morning. But in the palace shadows, there were always those who wanted to sow seeds of suspicion. Once, there was a rumor that I was plotting to seize the throne. I remember that day, in the middle of a council meeting, a white-bearded old official stepped forward, knelt, and said, "Your Majesty, I have heard rumors that the prince intends to take the throne." The entire hall stirred. I was numb, unable to react, but he didn't hesitate. He stood up, drew his sword, and the steel flashed. "Whoever dares to doubt my brother, doubts me. From now on, anyone who spreads this rumor will face my sword." His voice echoed throughout the great hall. The old official lowered his head, and the entire court fell silent. I looked at him, my heart in my throat. If I had had any doubt about our brotherhood at that moment, it completely vanished. He protected me against the whole world. One night, we sat by the Nile again. The moon hung in the sky, its silver light spread across the water. He threw a stone into the river, the ripples spreading out, and then said softly, "Did you ever think there would come a day when one of us would betray this vow. I laughed. Never. He looked at me for a long time, then laughed along. But in his eyes, I caught a glimpse of a deep worry, as if he could see something in the future. And now, as I sit in the darkness, my hands still trembling from the crime, that memory returns like a knife twisting deeper into my heart. I swore I would not betray him. But what did I do? I myself plunged the knife into him, turning our vow into destiny's mockery. No, it wasn't me, I scream in my heart. But the truth remains, the pool of red blood still stains the stone floor. If it wasn't me, then who? Who whispered those words into my head? Who turned this brotherhood into a crime? I don't know. I only know that since that night, my soul has not been at peace, and I will never be at peace. In those glorious years, there were strange seeds that I had never recognized. Sometimes I had dreams. In them, a whisper would call my name. The voice would say, "You are the chosen one. You are the one who is worthy." I would wake up, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I told my brother, but he just laughed it off. "It's just a nightmare. You need to rest." I believed him, but deep down, the voice felt too real, as if it didn't come from my mind, but from some outside force. Though I dismissed it, the whispering did not disappear. It returned, night after night. And that was how the darkness began to creep in. Amid the glory, amid the praise, an undercurrent of sound resonated, faint but persistent. One day, I would realize that it was from those invisible whispers that the seeds of tragedy were sown. Glory had never been so radiant. Egypt seemed to be bathed in the light of Ra. Harvests were bountiful. Merchant ships connected the two branches of the Nile. The people sang, and our enemies cowered in fear. But when the light reached its zenith, the darkness also began to stir. At first, there were only dreams. They came to me like strange winds. In the dream, I saw stone steps leading up to a throne. My brother was sitting on it, wearing the double crown. I walked towards him, but the closer I got, the farther the distance became. Then suddenly, a voice rang out, deep, hoarse, and hissing through the wind. "You are the chosen one. You are the one worthy to rule." I would jolt awake. My whole body would be soaked in sweat, my heart beating like a war drum. It returned, night after night, and each time, it was clearer, as if it were right beside my ear. It wasn't just dreams. Strange omens began to appear in the palace. Once, as I walked through the long corridor leading to the temple, I saw the flames on the torches suddenly burn a ghastly green. There was no wind, but the flames flickered as if they were whispering. I stood frozen, wondering if my eyes were playing tricks on me. Another time, during the festival of Osiris, I suddenly saw blood flowing from a stone statue. I looked around in alarm, but no one else saw it. When I asked, everyone said there was nothing there. Only I had seen it. I began to ask myself, were the gods sending me a sign, or was I slowly losing my mind? In those days, the only person often near me, besides my brother, was the queen. She was a beautiful and powerful woman. Her beauty lay not only in her appearance, but also in her cunning, her listening eyes, her voice as soft as the wind. Once, after the harvest festival, I sat alone in the palace garden. The wine had made me lightheaded, and my mind was spinning with the strange dreams. The queen approached, her white robe flowing gently in the night breeze. She sat down beside me, a smile like mist on her lips. "My prince, you look weary. Is something troubling you?" I hesitated for a moment, but then I told her about the dreams. She listened intently, without interruption. When I finished, she placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Sometimes, the gods send messages, but not everyone can hear them. Perhaps you are the chosen one." My heart stopped. Those words, why were they exactly like the voice in my dream? She gave a faint smile, stood up, and left, leaving me frozen under the moonlight, my mind reeling. From that day on, I began to pay more attention to her. At banquets, I saw her look at my brother with a gentle expression. But when her eyes met mine, they seemed to hold something deeper. A glance, a fleeting smile, was enough to stay in my memory. From then on, I began to look at myself differently. Whenever the people hailed the Pharaoh, I would ask myself, if I were the one on the throne, would they cheer for me? Whenever my brother was praised as the son of Ra, I would wonder, then who am I? Am I forever just the shadow at his side? I hated those questions, because I loved my brother. I had sworn never to betray him. But once the seed of doubt was sown, it grew relentlessly, and it was too late to uproot it. In the dreams that followed, the voice no longer whispered vaguely. It became clear, powerful, like a command. You are the chosen one. You were born to rule. You will never be the shadow. And then, in the darkness, I saw a blurred face. Sometimes it was a god. Sometimes it was the face of the queen. I couldn't tell them apart. I only knew that when I woke up, I had begun to believe that perhaps my destiny was not to live forever in my brother's shadow. From then on, the palace was no longer a safe place. To me, every corridor, every statue, every whisper of the wind held a secret. And with every gentle smile from the queen, I couldn't tell if it was kindness or a trap. But somehow, she had made me believe that there was another path for me. A path that the gods had laid out. A path that would lead me to glory or to the abyss. In the eyes of the people, we were still the perfect image of Ra and Horus. Two brothers, side by side, building an Egypt that no one could touch. They did not know that a storm was raging within me, one I could not control. My brother still treated me as he always had, gently, trustingly, without a hint of suspicion. Once, while discussing the expansion of the borders, he said in front of all the generals, "No one understands this battlefield better than my brother. Listen to his words as you would listen to my own command." The entire hall bowed in unison. I stood there, my heart clenching. A part of me wanted to scream, "Don't trust me so much. Don't you know what voices are in my head?" But I remained silent, wearing the smile everyone expected. In the days that followed, I found myself changing. Whenever I walked past the throne, I no longer saw it as just my brother's seat. For a fleeting moment, I would wonder, if I were to sit there, would it be any different? I despised that thought. It betrayed every memory, every vow made under the Nile moonlight. But like a snake slithering in the sand, the more I tried to chase it away, the deeper it hid. One evening, I sat on the veranda, watching the sunset paint the Nile red. She approached, a goblet of wine in her hand, and sat down beside me. Her voice was like a song. "Do you see? All this glory, without you, would not exist. But the people only see the Pharaoh." I said nothing. She smiled faintly and leaned closer. "You deserve so much more." Those words were like an arrow straight to my heart. It was not an insult, but a sweet whisper. And the most frightening thing was that I was beginning to believe it. And yet, every time I stood before my brother, all those wavering thoughts would vanish. He was still the one who had saved me from the darkness years ago. Still the one who protected me from the gossip of the court. Still the one with whom I had sworn an oath under the moon. He looked at me with eyes full of trust, and in those moments, I would tell myself, "No, I will never betray him." But then, when night fell, when the dreams returned, the whispers would rise again, the queen's voice mingling with that of some other force, reminding me, "You were not born to stand in the shadows." I was trapped between two worlds. On one side was brotherly love, on the other was the call of destiny or of a demon. Gradually, the palace also changed. I began to notice strange looks from the officials. They looked at me as if I were a second power in the court, a force that was growing. No one said it outright, but I could read the anticipation in their eyes, waiting for me to step up, to overcome my brother's shadow. I hated it, but I couldn't deny that it made me feel more important than ever before. And then, one bright moonlit night, I sat with my brother by the Nile once more. The wind was cool, the water flowed, the scene was just like the old days. He looked at me and smiled. "Do you remember what we once swore?" A pang went through my heart. I nodded. "In life or death, we will never betray each other." He was satisfied and clapped my shoulder, as if everything was fine. But within me, a darkness had begun to form. I silently asked myself, if one day it is I who betrays him, what will he think? Like a great pyramid built on a foundation of sand, our glorious era seemed solid, but small cracks had begun to appear within. No one saw them, no one heard them, except for me. And one day, the brilliant light would be obscured by darkness. Then the strange omens began to appear. One morning, as I walked past the temple of Horus, the statue of the falcon god suddenly fell right in front of me. Dozens of servants witnessed it, but no one understood why. The statue broke into two pieces. The head and the body were separated. A terrifying thought flashed through my mind. A head separated from its body, sign of a change on the throne. It wasn't just during the day. At night, I often heard strange noises in the palace corridors. The sound of footsteps following close behind me, but when I turned, there was no one there. Sometimes, I saw a shadow flit across a wall, as fleeting as smoke. Once, I could have sworn I saw my brother's silhouette, but when I got closer, it vanished like scattered sand. In those moments, the whisper would rise again. He is no longer your brother. He is the one who occupies your place. You must reclaim what is yours. I would cover my ears with my hands, screaming in the empty room. "Be silent, that is my brother. I will not betray him." But the more I shouted, the clearer the whispers became, like hundreds of voices echoing at once, boring deep into my mind. The conflict within me grew larger every day. There were mornings when I would look at my brother on the throne, the light shining down on his crown, making him look like the incarnation of Ra. My heart would be filled with pride and love. He was my brother, my savior, the wall that protected me. But immediately after, the whisper would return. "You sit at his feet, while he enjoys the glory. He has everything, and you are just a shadow." I looked around. The officials knelt before him, cheering him, praising him as the son of the gods. And me, they only spoke of me as a loyal aide. A strange fire ignited within me, a mix of both envy and shame. That night, I dreamed I was standing on a high tower, looking down at the blood-red Nile. My brother lay fallen at my feet, his crown having rolled off his head. As I stooped to pick it up, the queen's voice rang out, blending with the voices of the gods. "You are worthy. This is your destiny." I woke up with a start, my hands clenched so tightly they drew blood. For the first time, a terrible thought flickered through my mind. What if it came true? But the next day, when he placed a hand on my shoulder and smiled kindly, "Without you, I could not stand firm." My heart melted once more. Tears welled up. I wanted to confess everything, to tell him about the voices, the obsessions, the darkness in my head. One morning, I saw my hands trembling even as I held a pen. On the white papyrus, I couldn't write a single word, only strange symbols, exactly like the ones that had appeared in my dreams. The realization chilled me to the bone. Those symbols were a sign of death. I tore the paper and burned it, but the rising smoke took the shape of a burning crown. I screamed, but within the roaring flame, I heard, "There is no escape. You have been chosen," and I felt it in my bones. Something terrible was drawing near. As the days went by, I slowly realized I was no longer in control of myself. At first I still had the strength to resist. When the whispers rose in my dreams, I would shout, trying to drive them away. When the queen spoke of destiny, I would turn away, telling myself I was a loyal brother. But then, like water seeping into stone, those words trickled in, permeating, and shaking the rock that I thought was my resolve. From that day on, I stopped resisting. I walked through the palace like a phantom, listening to the whispers as if they were commands. Every night, I saw myself holding a dagger in my dreams. When I woke, my robe was drenched in sweat. My hands were clenched so tightly they bled. I could no longer distinguish between illusion and reality. When I looked at my brother, I still saw the man who had protected me. But at the same time, I also saw a stranger, a rival who had to be struck down. Then the fated night drew near. I knew, somehow, that the time had come. No one told me, but I felt it like a breath on the back of my neck. My brother, as usual, would walk through the great hall, then proceed to his inner chamber before going to bed. I waited in the inner chamber, ready to strike. He came just as I had anticipated. In that moment, my eyes blurred. Half of me wanted to rush to him, to embrace him, to tell him the whole truth. But the other half, controlled by the darkness, tightened its grip on the dagger's hilt. That night, the Egyptian sky was moonless, with only sparse stars hanging palely, like cold eyes watching us. The great hall was filled with torchlight, but the flames seemed weak and trembling, casting distorted shadows on the walls. In my mind, the whisper rose again, this time no longer a mix of voices, but a clear, decisive command. The time has come. You must do it. My whole body trembled. Half of my soul wanted to rush to him, to scream that I loved him, that I was just a puppet. But the other half, the one dominated by the darkness, raised the dagger and slowly stepped forward. That moment stretched on for an eternity. I could hear his every breath, the wild rhythm of my own heart. The blade gleamed under the torchlight, flashing like a falling star. Then, the dagger plunged down. That sound, the sound of steel tearing through flesh, the sound of blood gushing, will haunt me forever. He fell to his knees and turned to look at me. His eyes were wide, not with hatred, but with disbelief. In that gaze, there was even a flicker of pity. Why? Just 2 words, and then his lips sealed. His breath stopped. His tall body collapsed onto the cold stone floor. Blood flowing out in a deep red trail, spreading slowly under the torchlight. In that very moment, I came to my senses. The dagger fell from my hand with a sharp clatter. I looked down at my blood-stained, trembling hands, then up at my brother's motionless body at my feet. No, no. This can't be. I knelt down, hugging him, shaking him hard. His blood soaked my robe, warm and heavy, with its metallic smell. My tears mingled with his blood. Wake up, brother. It's me. It's me. I didn't mean to. I didn't, but it was no use. His body was growing cold, his eyes closed, taking with them all the trust and love he had ever given me. I screamed, my voice echoing throughout the empty great hall. My scream blended with the howling wind in the corridor, resounding like the cries of 1,000 souls. For a moment, as I looked up through my tears, I caught a glimpse in the dark corner of the hall a silent, motionless silhouette. Its gaze was fixed on me, cold as ice. I rubbed my eyes, looked again, and the figure had vanished. I wasn't sure if it was a hallucination, or if someone had truly witnessed it. A fleeting suspicion crossed my mind. Was there someone behind all this? Could it be the Queen? But my mind was in chaos, too muddled to think. Only the truth was starkly evident. My hands had killed my brother. I held his body tight, sobbing like a child abandoned in the desert. And that night, my soul died with him. After that night, I was no longer myself. Everything around me was covered in the color of blood. No matter how many times I washed my hands, scrubbing until they bled, I still saw the splotches of red on my skin, clinging to me relentlessly. Whenever I looked in the bronze mirror, the face reflected wasn't mine, but a blood-smeared face with eyes full of guilt. On the day of his funeral, the people of Egypt wept in the streets. They wore ash on their heads, tore their robes, and offered sacrifices to the Pharaoh's soul. I walked among the crowd, hearing every sob, every cry of eternal king, and my heart felt as if it were being torn apart. People looked at me, some with pity, thinking I had lost my brother, others with suspicion at my reddened eyes. But in my heart, there was only one sickening truth. I was the one who had killed him. Night after night, I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. Sometimes he was my kind brother, holding my hand and running on the sand. Sometimes he was the Pharaoh, his chest covered in blood, reaching out and asking, "Why, my brother?" I would wake with a start, screaming, drenched in cold sweat. Servants would rush in, alarmed, but I just waved them away. I didn't want anyone to see a madman, a sinner. On the day of my coronation, Memphis Square was packed. They cheered my name, "Hail the new Pharaoh." Drums boomed, and incense filled the air. But beneath the cheers, I could clearly hear every whisper, every suspicious glance. No one dared to ask publicly why a young healthy pharaoh had passed away so quietly. But I knew the rumors were already spreading. Have the gods grown angry? Is there a bad omen in the palace? Then came the court meetings. I sat on the throne where he was supposed to be. The light shone down, blinding me. The officials prostrated themselves, hailing me. "Hail the new Pharaoh! Hail!" The cheers were deafening, but in my ears, all I could hear was the sound of blood flowing. I looked down at the throne, and for a moment, saw blood pouring out of the cracks in the stone floor, spreading throughout the great hall. I trembled, nearly falling. Sometimes, in the midst of the cheers, I would see the queen. She did not cry, nor did she seem happy. She just watched me silently with an inscrutable gaze. In just that flicker of an eye, a vague suspicion would pierce my heart. Could it be that she knows? The strange omens continued. One day, in the temple, I saw the statue of the god Horus split apart, its pieces falling exactly where I knelt. The people saw it as a bad omen for the nation, but I understood. It was a curse for me alone. Another time, when I lit the incense to pray, the fire went out, and the smoke formed the shape of my brother. His eyes filled with pain as he looked at me. I recoiled in terror, my heart pounding. I began to ask myself, is this a punishment from the gods, or just the hallucinations of a murderer? The queen didn't say much, but whenever our eyes met, I was reminded of her earlier whispers. Destiny never changes. Those words were like a needle still lodged in my brain. I didn't dare to fully believe she was behind it all, but I also couldn't dismiss the thought. Without her, would I have ever heard those whispers? Guilt turned me into a solitary man. I avoided the court, and even banquets. Servants whispered behind my back that the new pharaoh was becoming a walking corpse. Once, I stood on the terrace looking down at the Nile. The river water was crystal clear, but in my eyes, I saw a river of blood, where my brother was slowly sinking to the bottom. I almost threw myself in after him, but some invisible hands held me back. No, I couldn't die. Not yet. Not when I hadn't found the truth. Did the gods truly choose me, or was I just a pawn in someone else's hand? And so I lived on, like a man in invisible chains. With each passing day, the weight on my heart grew heavier. I looked at the throne, but saw a tomb. I was no longer sure of anything, except for one single truth. My brother's death was the beginning of a chain of tragedies from which I could never escape. There were nights I sat alone in the dark great hall, with only a flickering torch beside the throne. The firelight danced on the walls, carved with the victories of ancient kings, but in my eyes, everything turned into scenes of bloodshed. Falling bodies, and my brother's face fading into dust. I held the scepter in my hand, but it felt heavier than 1,000 stones. This scepter was once a symbol of divine authority. Now it was just a chain, binding me to a sin from which there was no escape. The people hailed me, calling me Pharaoh, the representative of Ra on earth. But every time that cheer rang out, all I heard was a curse, the killer of his brother, the betrayer. Wherever I went, their eyes seemed to pierce right through me. Even when they bowed their heads, I felt as though I was being stared at, as if all of Egypt knew the truth. Many times, I wanted to confess. I wanted to stand before the people, before the court, before the queen herself, and say, "It was I who killed him," punish me. But every time that thought flickered, an invisible force held me back, as if some hand was squeezing my heart, forcing me to remain silent. And I wondered, was that the hand of the gods, or the hand of someone else? One night, I dreamed I was standing in the middle of a vast desert. My brother appeared, a towering figure, but his eyes were filled with sorrow. He held out his hand. "My brother, why won't you come with me?" I fell to my knees, sobbing, "Because I can't. I am bound by chains." He turned away, his form slowly dissolving into the sand. From behind, I heard a faint laugh. I couldn't tell if it belonged to a god, or to the queen. When I woke up, I faced a brutal truth. I was no longer a free man. I was a walking corpse, a puppet wearing a royal robe. Although my heart was full of guilt, I could not die, because death would not be an escape. I knew that invisible hand would not release me until I was completely exhausted, until I became a lost grain of sand in the endless desert. And so I continued to sit on the throne, withering away a little more each day. I no longer knew if I lived for Egypt, for the gods, or simply for someone else who was pulling my strings. But deep within me, a small fire had not yet gone out. Doubt if my brother's death was not the will of the gods. Then who had been whispering in my ear all this time? That fire of doubt, however faint, was the only thing that kept me alive. And so, my tragedy ends here, not with liberation, but with a question left hanging in the darkness. Who truly was the master of the Pharaoh's death? The death of my brother, the Pharaoh whom the people called the bright son of Ra, not only took a great soul, but also left a vast emptiness in the heart of Egypt. The court was divided. Some of the officials who had been loyal to my brother were now cold and distant, the look of trust in their eyes gone as they knelt before the throne. In contrast, there were those who quickly prostrated themselves, flattering me with flowery words. I knew they were not sincere. They were simply sniffing out the scent of new power. And I, sitting on that throne, felt like I was on the brink of a volcanic eruption. The throne was heavy, not just with gold, but with my brother's blood that had seeped into it. The people still worked, still sang at harvest time, and still worshipped the gods. But the brilliant festivals now had a layer of gloom. When the statues of the gods were paraded through the streets, many people wept silently instead of singing with joy. They spoke the name of the fallen pharaoh more than they cheered for the new king. At night I could hear murmurs from outside the palace, prayers for my brother's soul. Their cries made my throat tighten, as if 1,000 daggers were twisting in my chest. Not only had the people changed, but nature itself seemed to have turned its back on us. The Nile's flood came later than usual that year. The fields were dry, and the farmers began to worry. They said to each other, "The pharaoh died unjustly. The gods are punishing us." The sacred cattle of the temple of TThe suddenly fell ill, and many collapsed. The priests whispered, "This is a bad omen. The gods do not accept the new king." I stood watching, my heart heavy. Every strange omen felt like an arrow pointing directly at me. The brother killer, the one who betrayed the gods. At night, when I walked through the palace corridors, the guards would bow their heads, but in their eyes, I saw fear, not reverence. Some looked at me as if I were cursed. Others looked as if I carried the ghost of the dead pharaoh with me. Yet, amidst all the doubt and darkness, one thing remained: the legacy my brother had left behind. The great structures he had initiated still stood tall. The pyramid, though unfinished, already reached for the sky. The temple of Ra was still bathed in sunlight. The laws he had enacted still protected the people, and the fields still recalled the abundant harvests of his reign. Every time I saw them, my heart felt as if it were bleeding, because they reminded me that he was the one who was supposed to be here, continuing to lead Egypt to glory. And me, just a usurper. This crown is too heavy. It is cold. Cold like the metal blade of that night. I sit here, on the throne of Egypt, where the light of Ra shines. Everyone bows to me, calls me Pharaoh, the one and only son. But in my heart, there is only dense darkness. They are hailing a king, but I only see a murderer. No, was it really me? In his final moments, he did not look at me with hatred. He looked at me with surprise, and with a sorrow even deeper than the blade. That gaze asked me a question that I still cannot answer to this day. Why? Why? I want to know, too. I loved him. This entire kingdom knew it. The gods above knew it. He was my son, my ideal. When he walked, I was content to be his shadow. When he ascended the throne, I swore I would be his sword. I was happy with that. I was proud. So what changed? It began with whispers. A voice that wasn't my own. It crept into my mind during sleepless nights. It told me my admiration was envy. It told me my loyalty was foolishness. It told me I, too, was a son, and the sky could not hold two suns. You deserve more, the voice echoed. Take what is yours. And so, my tragedy ends here, not with liberation, but with a question hanging in the darkness. Who truly was the master of the pharaoh's death? Every time I look at the queen, a vague suspicion arises. She did not cry when the pharaoh died, nor does she ever mention his name anymore. In her eyes, I only see something deep, cold, and calculating. And so, sitting alone in the darkness of the great hall, I whisper one final oath. Even if it costs me my life, I will find the hand that turned me into a betrayer. But will I have the strength to fight the darkness that has already consumed me? Or will I die before the truth is revealed?